In this video, you'll learn about the most intense 8 minutes of my life. My name is Esteban Morales. I've been a doctor for over 30 years and have always believed in what can be proven. But everything changed one ordinary night during a friend's birthday celebration. After a sudden collapse, I was declared clinically dead, and it was at that moment that I had an encounter with Jesus, a real, direct, and transformative experience. He revealed to me 7 foods that will save lives in 2026, and today I share this testimony with you, an intimate, profound, and faith-filled account that can change your perspective on the world. If this story resonates with you, subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Leave a like, it helps us reach more people with messages like this, and tell me in the comments, what city or country are you watching from? I'd love to know how far this story is reaching. May this story speak to your heart. I was never the type of person who mixed faith with medicine. For over 30 years of my career, my life was based on protocols, tests, and numbers. I trusted science and science alone. I never denied the existence of God, but I also never sought answers beyond what I could find in a medical record or an electrocardiogram. My name is Esteban Morales. I am 59 years old, and until December 2, 2025, I was a skeptical, grounded doctor, respected by colleagues and patients. That day, I was invited to the 50th birthday of a dear friend, also a doctor, named Patricia. The event was at a retreat outside the city, something more focused on wellness and spirituality, which already made me a little uncomfortable. But I accepted the invitation to honor our friendship, and because, I confess, I needed to relax. The evening was pleasant. The place was surrounded by forest with a large, rustic house, filled with candles and soft ambient music. Patricia, always enthusiastic about natural practices, had prepared a detox cocktail that, according to her, boosted immunity and awareness. I hesitated. My instinct told me not to drink it, but I didn't want to seem arrogant or ruin her celebration. I drank it. The taste was bitter, difficult to describe, and within minutes I felt something strange in my chest, a pressure, then tingling, and soon my vision began to blur. I knew something was wrong. I tried to call for help, but my voice simply wouldn't come out. I only remember seeing Patricia approaching with wide eyes, and then the ground coming toward me. It was as if someone had pulled a cable and disconnected everything. I can't explain what happened after that in exact words. It wasn't like sleeping, nor was it like fainting. It was unlike anything. I felt as if I was being pulled out of myself, as if my body had been left behind and I had passed through some kind of invisible barrier, like when we submerge ourselves in hot water and feel everything change density around us. The first thing I noticed was the silence, an absolute silence, but one that wasn't empty. It was as if that silence had life, as if it were enveloping me. I saw myself outside my body. I really was standing there, looking at the floor where my body, had been lying. The light in the house seemed more intense, whiter. I saw Patricia kneeling beside me in desperation, trying to resuscitate my chest with CPR. One of the guests was shouting on the phone for an ambulance. That scene gave me a feeling of strangeness and, at the same time, peace. I didn't feel afraid. I just watched as if I were watching a movie whose ending I already knew. But then everything around me changed in the blink of an eye. I was no longer in that house, nor in that room, nor on earth. I seemed to be enveloped by a light that didn't come from a specific point. It was as if that light were alive, as if it knew me. It was welcoming. I saw no walls, no ceiling, no floor, but I felt a firmness beneath my feet, and there, in the midst of that light, a figure emerged. No, it wasn't dazzling or threatening, it was familiar. Even without him saying a word, I knew, it was Jesus. His gaze pierced me in a way no human being ever could. It was as if he saw every thought, every mistake, every fear I'd ever had. I couldn't say anything. I could only stand there, overcome by a kind of reverence I can't describe. And then he said my name, Stephen. It was then that I understood this wasn't just an experience, it was a calling. When he said my name, it seemed as if the sound pierced through my entire being. It wasn't an ordinary voice, it didn't come from outside, it was as if every cell in my body heard it at the same time. I felt ashamed, I confess, ashamed for having lived so long trusting more in science than in faith, ashamed for having ignored signs, my mother's silent prayers when I was a child, so many opportunities to draw closer to God that I simply let slip by. But at that moment, Jesus didn't accuse me, on the contrary, he simply looked at me with such deep, genuine compassion that I began to weep, real tears, as if my soul were cleansing itself of everything that had been trapped for decades, and then he said with a serene steadiness, "You have been brought here because you need to see something beyond what your human eyes can see." The light around me began to change, it was as if I were being transported without moving. Suddenly we were looking at the earth, but from above there could be continents, oceans, cities, and I saw chaos. I saw ships at rest, empty supermarkets, crops destroyed by storms. Everything was happening quickly, like a sequence of visions unfolding before me, and Jesus said to me, "In 2026, the world will face a scarcity like never before. Many will not be ready, but you must bring them what I am about to show you, not to cause fear, but so that they may have hope." I felt the weight of every word. I knew that wasn't a metaphor, it was a real, direct warning. I was there, a middle-aged doctor, accustomed to scalpels and prescriptions, about to receive instructions from Christ himself about foods that, according to him, would soon save lives. The first vision began as if I were being taken to the past. I saw myself in an immense field, with plantations stretching to the horizon. There were people harvesting rice carefully, almost reverently. It was as if each grain had a special meaning, and then I heard Jesus explain to me, this was the first food I gave to humanity when they decided to cultivate the land. He showed me images of ancient times, men and women working with their hands in the mud, smiling despite the effort. Then I saw Mexican families in 2026 opening bags of carefully stored rice. It was perfect, not moldy, not spoiled, intact. They cooked the rice with simplicity, and it was as if it sustained not only their bodies but also their hope. This is the foundation, Jesus said. Rice is faithfulness. It is what remains firm when everything else collapses. The second vision took me to fields of legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas. I saw them from biblical times to the humble homes of rural Mexico, with mothers cooking pots of beans while their children waited, hungry and faithful. Jesus showed me that these seeds carry life, even when they appear dead. He said, legumes are the food of resurrection. They represent my promise that even when everything seems over, there will be rebirth. At that moment, I was moved again. I thought about how many times, as a doctor, I underestimated these foods. I saw how, combined with rice, they form a complete protein sufficient to keep a person strong, even in the absence of meat. Jesus spoke, prepare people, rice and beans will be more valuable than gold. They will sustain families when meat is just a memory. And as he spoke, I saw real, future scenes, people surviving, praying before every spoonful. The third vision took me by surprise. I was taken to a simple country kitchen, where a Mexican woman was teaching her granddaughter how to make homemade pasta. It was a common scene, but there was something sacred about the way her hands shaped the dough. It was as if that gesture had been passed down through generations. Jesus told me, pasta represents communion. It is the food that unites the family around the table, even when there is little. I saw European monks storing dried pasta in giant jars during times of war and plague. It was what sustained entire communities when everything around them was falling apart. Then B26, humble houses, small stoves, families boiling small portions of pasta with almost no sauce, and yet there were smiles, children jumping at the sight of the dish being served. And Jesus spoke firmly, this food brings comfort to the heart. When the world is silent, without electricity, without celebration, without bread, pasta will be what keeps the spirit alive. The fourth vision took me directly to the Great Plains of North America. Long before the arrival of Europeans, I saw indigenous tribes preparing a food I immediately recognized, pemmican, a dense mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries. It was made with reverence, with prayer. Jesus told me, he explained, this is the food of ancestral wisdom, a revelation I gave to ancient peoples so they could survive the most difficult times. The scene changed, and I saw explorers, hunters, soldiers in ancient wars, all eating small pieces of this food. It was dense, caloric, full of energy. Then I saw the future, Mexican families learning to make pemmican at home with beef, pure fat, and dried fruit, while many around them were getting sick from a lack of protein and fat. These families remained strong. Jesus said, not everyone will make pemmican, but whoever does will have a secret weapon in the battle for survival. At that moment, I began to perceive that every food carried a spiritual function and a practical lesson. In the fifth vision, everything became dry, arid, as if I were in the middle of a desert. The ground was cracked, and the heat seemed to emanate from the sky itself. Suddenly, I began to see men wearing ancient uniforms in wooden boats. They were eating a type of biscuit, hard, dry, almost impossible to chew. Jesus told me, that's nautical biscuit. It sustained sailors, soldiers, explorers. It doesn't spoil, it doesn't age, it doesn't abandon you. The simplicity of that food impressed me. It was just flour, water, and salt, but it lasted for decades. The scene changed, and I saw families in 2026 gathered around a pot of hot water and some herbs, breaking up those hard biscuits and soaking them in the water to soften them. It wasn't tasty, but it was enough. When the gas runs out, when the power runs out, when everything runs out, these biscuits will guarantee the hard days. They are constancy. They are my faithfulness in the form of dry bread, Jesus said, and I felt small again for having so often underestimated the value of simplicity. The sixth vision was perhaps the most moving for me. I was taken to a remote place among trees and stones, where a group of men were extracting honey from a beehive. I could see the golden sheen of the substance trickling into clay pots and their faces illuminated with gratitude. Jesus spoke with a special tenderness. I sweetened the world first with honey, before sugar, before any artifice. I gave this to humankind as a sign of my goodness. In the midst of bitterness, I saw John the Baptist surviving in the desert on wild honey and locusts. I saw mothers using honey to heal wounds, soothe coughs, and feed weak children. In 2026, I saw the scene repeat itself, houses with jars of raw honey stored in dark places, people using what they had creatively to nourish and heal. And Jesus told me, it's not just food, it's healing, it's sweetness when the world is bitter, it's the living reminder that even in pain, there is still hope. The last vision began in a very different way. Jesus took me to a place that looked like a deserted beach, but in the sandy place had white crystals scattered on the ground. The sun shone on them and everything shimmered. I only understood what it was about when he said, "This is preserved salvation, this is salt." And then he showed me ancient caravans crossing deserts, carrying blocks of salt as if they were treasures. I saw Roman soldiers being paid with salt. I saw entire civilizations building empires around that element. And he continued, without salt, nothing is preserved. Without salt, life falls apart. It is the food of the covenant. It is purity, preservation, permanence. I saw mothers using salt to clean wounds, preserve food, and hydrate their children with water and salty pinches. And in 2026, again, the images were repeated. Families had rice, beans, meat, but without salt, everything spoiled. Jesus said firmly, salvation is in preparing and preserving, and whoever has salt will have more than sustenance. They will have the authority to help others. When the vision ended, I was back in that place of light. Jesus was there in front of me. There was nothing else around, just the two of us. My chest felt heavy, as if I were carrying everything I had seen at once, and he placed his hand on my shoulder. I don't know how to explain it, because I didn't even have a body there, but I felt a soft, sure warmth pass through me, and then he said, "These 7 foods are not random. Each one carries a part of my character. They will sustain the bodies, but also the faith." I wanted to stay there. I really wanted to ask more, to understand more, but before I could say anything, he spoke again, this time more softly. "Now go back, share what you saw, Not everyone will believe, but those who listen with their hearts will know it's true. The transition back was brutal. There was no gentleness. It was as if I had been pulled back into my body with a burning force. I remember the pain piercing my chest as if every nerve were on fire. My body arched on its own, and the sound of the defibrillator echoed in my ears. That's when I realized I was back. The cold light of the room, the muffled cries, Patricia crying, I could hear everything, but I still couldn't move my body. The paramedics were on top of me, and one of them shouted, "He's back. We have a heartbeat." It all seemed distant, as if my mind were still trapped somewhere else. My eyes slowly opened, and I saw Patricia holding my hand, her face wet with tears. She kept repeating, "Forgive me, I thought I had killed you," but I knew that this hadn't been an accident. It had been a calling, a mission. I stayed in the hospital for several days after that. The physical recovery was slow, but what weighed most heavily was what was inside me, the images, the words, the presence of Jesus. None of it left my head. I couldn't sleep well. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that I was still in his presence. It was a mixture of longing and responsibility. I knew I needed to tell what I had experienced, but I didn't know how. A doctor talking about spiritual revelations. I knew a madman would appear, that they would laugh, question my sanity, and call it delirium caused by hypoxia. But the more I tried to keep it to myself, the more it gnawed at me inside. It was as if I were denying a truth that was no longer mine alone, but everyone's. Then, one day I simply grabbed a pen and a notebook and began to write down every detail, every vision, every word I heard. The first people I shared what I wrote with were my children. They listened in silence. I thought they would laugh or interrupt me, but no, they just looked at me with a different kind of respect, as if they were seeing for the first time who I really was. My eldest daughter cried. My youngest son was quiet for a few days and then came to ask me where he could buy vacuum-sealed rice and glass jars. It was then that I realized, I didn't need to convince the whole world, it was enough for the right people to listen. Then I shared it with some doctor friends. As I expected, many laughed, some felt uncomfortable. One of them said mockingly that I must have had too much honey with salt, but others sought me out privately afterward. They said that despite their skepticism, something within them had been touched. That they felt the world was truly different, and that perhaps, just perhaps, what I experienced was real. Over time, other people began to seek me out, people who had heard from others, who had read fragments of what I had written. Some came out of curiosity, others with urgency. I saw ordinary people arrive with notebooks in hand, taking notes on everything I said. People from the city, from the countryside, from other countries, and I also saw those who mocked me, ridiculed me, said it was a conspiracy theory, fanaticism, delusion. At first, that bothered me. I wanted to convince, to prove, but then I understood that my mission wasn't to argue with anyone, it was simply to tell, to show what I had seen. Jesus had been clear, not everyone will believe, but those who listen with their hearts will know, and so I continued. I started recording videos, giving talks, and speaking with churches, prayer groups, and rural associations without labels, without religion, without vested interests. Just a doctor who died for 8 minutes and returned with an urgent message for anyone willing to listen. One of the things that impacted me most was seeing how some families began to completely change after they understood the message. I'm not just talking about storing food, I'm talking about a real-life change. People who previously lived on autopilot began to gather at home, cook together, talk about faith, and study the Bible with their children. I saw simple people, without many resources, buying a little rice each week, separating beans. They were writing down pemmican recipes they'd seen in old internet videos. It was as if that physical preparation was awakening something deeper, a consciousness, a sense that all of this had a greater purpose. I saw entire families returning to prayer, couples reconciling, young people becoming interested in values they had previously despised. The message wasn't just filling pantries, it was preparing hearts. At the same time, I began to perceive that the news in the world was aligning with what Jesus had shown: blocked ports, lost crops, crazy weather, supply chain disruptions. Everything that seemed exaggerated when I first described it began to happen, but that wasn't what scared me the most. What truly frightened me was seeing how, even in the face of these signs, most people preferred to keep pretending that everything would work out, as if they didn't want to believe that the world could truly change, as if it were more comfortable to deny than to act. And then I understood the weight of what Jesus told me, that many would knock on the door too late, not out of malice, but out of unbelief, pride, fear of appearing ridiculous. And that is why even today, even weary, even when criticized, I continue to speak, because if just one family is prepared and preserved, it will all have been worthwhile. There was one night in particular that I will never forget. I had just given a short talk in a rural community. It was a simple room with wooden benches and dim light from hanging bulbs. After I finished speaking, a woman called me aside. She must have been over 70 years old. He grabbed my hand tightly and said, "Doctor, I don't understand anything about the internet or medicine. But when you spoke, I felt inside that it was true," and he placed his hand on his chest. That disarmed me because it was exactly what I felt when Jesus spoke to me in that place of light. It wasn't something that could be proven with numbers. It was a truth that was recognized with the Spirit, and that's how people are going to connect with this message. It's not through logic, it's through the heart, through the attentive spirit, through the faith that still whispers, even when the world shouts the opposite. Over time, I realized that physical preparation was only one part of what Jesus wanted to show. Because food can sustain the body, but what sustains the soul is obedience. I saw people store tons of food, but without changing their hearts. And I saw people who only had a little stored away, but who already lived with faith, with peace, with promptness. It wasn't about having a full pantry. It was about being sensitive to God's direction, listening when He speaks, responding when He calls. My life was turned upside down after that experience, but strangely, I found a kind of peace I had never felt before. It's not the absence of problems. I have many. It's something else. It's knowing that no matter what happens, I fulfilled what I was called to do. I shared what I saw. I was a witness. One thing I learned in this whole process is that people's silence doesn't mean indifference. Many people who remained silent during my talks later sought me out privately. I began to understand that there are people who feel, but don't know how to put it into words, and that's okay. It took me years to understand what my own mother meant when she spoke of faith. Today I realize that she only wanted me not to stray from that which is unseen, and perhaps that's why God pulled me back that day to remind me of what truly matters. Today, every time I talk about the 7 foods, I don't just see food, I see signs. Each item represents a part of Jesus' character. They aren't just things to keep on the shelf, they are testimonies that He cares for us, even in the details of what we're going to eat in the midst of chaos. And you know what's the strangest thing? After that day, I never had another vision, no dream, no other spiritual manifestation. It was just that, 8 clinical minutes, an eternity in there, and since then, silence. It's as if it all ended. I handed it all in at once, and the rest came with me. I've asked myself 1,000 times why I was chosen. I still wonder. I'm just an ordinary doctor, but one thing I know, I didn't come back from there in vain. And if you're listening to or reading this now, perhaps it wasn't in vain either. Perhaps this message was made for you now, not to scare you, but to prepare you. And if you don't believe me, that's okay, but keep this. When the time comes, the Spirit will remind you, and you'll know what to do. Today, when I look back, it all seems impossible to explain. It was too real to be a dream, but also so extraordinary that even I, who lived it, sometimes find myself silently trying to understand how a skeptical doctor who spent his life relying solely on science ended up hearing direct instructions from Jesus Christ about rice, beans, salt, and honey. I don't know. I only know that it happened in such a clear, such a powerful way that my life was never the same again. I can't pretend I didn't see what I saw, and the strangest thing of all is this: after that day, nothing ever happened again, no visions, no voices, no other signs, just silence. A silence that lasts to this day and that still occasionally visits me in the early morning, as if it were saying, you know what you have to do. Perhaps the hardest part is to keep talking, even without feeling anything now, because people expect me to say that I see angels or that I receive messages every day, but it wasn't just once, 8 minutes, an eternity, and then the silence and the mission. So that's it. I speak, I write, I share, not for myself, but for him, because he entrusted this to me, and I can't fail. I don't know what will happen in 2026, but I know that when everything starts to fall apart, those who listened will remember and understand, and if only one of those families is forgiven, it will have been worth dying for 8 minutes, because sometimes it is in that interval between two heartbeats that eternity decides to visit the earth. If you've made it this far, then you knows that this story wasn't just about a doctor. It was about me, and perhaps about you too. What I experienced was real, and if there's one thing this experience taught me, it's that God continues to speak, but only those who choose to listen hear. And now I want to ask you, if it were you, would you be prepared for what's to come? Tell me in the comments what you felt when you heard this testimony. Do you think this message is a divine warning? Have you already begun to prepare? If this touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos, because what's coming could change many things in your life, and if you enjoy this type of content and want to help spread these messages, click the Become a Member button below. This helps us reach more people and continue producing content like this with truth, faith, and responsibility. A recommended video should now appear on your screen. Click on it as well. It's another powerful testimony that will touch your heart. Stay with God, and until next time.